Hi, welcome to Car Mechanical. In this video I'm going to show you how to remove the strut on your Honda Jazz and then various parts of disassembly. So just firstly, what I'm showing you here is the reason I removed it. If you see the top mount on this strut, I think either the top mount or the bearings were completely gone. So the original plan for this was to remove the strut and to replace the top mount and the bearings. I was going to do that with some lem fodder units and it was £45 to do both sides. So we're going to go into what we need to do to remove the strut. So kind of standard steps for working on a car. We're going to open the bonnet up so we can see what we're doing in there. We're going to jack the car up. We're going to loosen off the nuts on the wheel before we jack it up. Once I get it on the stand, I'm then going to just finish taking the wheel nuts off very quickly for you, and then we'll get the wheel off and then we can actually get to work. So in theory, taking the strut off, it shouldn't be too much hard work, but I ended up having a bit of a nightmare with this, and I'll go into it over the course of the video, but let's treat it as a normal job for now. Okay, so the first thing we're going to remove is the anti-roll bar link from the strut. I believe it's a 15 or 16mm. Sometimes these have a little hex fitting inside, so you need to do it with a spanner on the outside and an Allen key on the inside, but this one's been changed over to an aftermarket type. We then need to pop off this wire for the ABS. So that will just pop off with a screwdriver. And then next we're going to remove the strut from the hub. So these are both 17mm, and we'll speed this up, but we're just going to undo everything here. And this little bracket on the right, that needs to be taken off of the strut when you get it off the car. We also need to undo a little nut in a minute to get the brake line off as well. So once I've knocked out that last bolt here, so we're going to get that out of the way, the hub should come free of the strut, so we just need to manoeuvre it out of the way. Right, just a quick note here, your drive shaft you have to be careful with, they can knock out the tripod joint. Now this one is a 12mm for the bracket, and it was quite tight. I had to use some plus gas, but after initially getting it out, I had to put the bolt back in to brace it as well, but after initially getting it loose it came out easily enough and it could remove the brake line. Right, so next thing, this might be a problem area. You should be able to put a 6mm hex in here, and you should be able to use a spanner to just undo it. So the spanner size you'd be using for this is a 17mm, and I ran into the problem that it just started to spin. So what I ended up trying then was another bigger 6mm or 7mm I think, and they wouldn't work. What I had to do, I think I ended up using Torx bits and going up a size until I got one that stuck. I can actually get it undone. So what you'll be using here is a 17mm, and I managed to get one of my ratcheting spanners over the top here to undo it. So you're just going to hold it on top, and that's why I'm using a breaker bar just to make it a bit easier, because it just really wasn't sticking when I was trying to use one of the normal hex bits or an Allen key. And you just can undo that 17mm, and eventually it will just sort of slide off and we can get access to the strut. Now if you just want to remove the strut and as a built unit, this is pretty much it. I run into a complete nightmare on the other side, which I'll be making a video on. I've read up that people can have issues with this. I'm going to cover that separately. So we're going to take the top mount out and the cover, and we've got the strut out. So next after this, I need to replace this top mount here, which has seen better days, and also that bearing underneath. So to do that, I'm going to use some spring compressors. So just a note on safety here, be very, very careful on these. Please look into various other videos that people have made on how to use spring compressors. I generally try and do them a bit either side and then just work them. So I get them evenly apart on the spring. I start them off by hand, and then I'm going to end up using sort of my ratchet on there. And I just tend to work them down a bit on one side and then the other. Now I am greatly speeding this up because it takes minutes otherwise, but I'm sort of switching back between the two sides to compress it. So we just want it compressed enough so the spring is pulling away from the top, and that when we undo the top mount to get to that, the spring isn't going to fly out, everything's nice and safe, and we can pull it apart to rebuild it. Now this is where I run into more fun with this job. So I need to get a bit back in the top, and I need to undo this 17mm, which will let me pull the spring out and let me change the top mount and anything should you need to do it. And the problem I'm having here is that it's literally just turning, so the metal in the top is just shredding itself, and I just think it's due to being a cheaper and old component or whichever. A lot of videos you see that this works perfectly. I didn't have any such joy with this, and to cut a long story short, after this I ended up taking the strut to a friend's house. We go to town on it, and I ended up having to cut the top of it off to get the nut off and ordering 2 new struts. I expected the other side to be problematic, but it was even worse than I expected. So we're going to jump across here, and let's say you can get it across by doing the normal method. We can then take the strut apart. So for whatever reason, you might just be replacing the top mount here, or you might be replacing the springs. You've got a snap spring, or your strut might be no good, so you might be replacing the strut. So I've just stripped that down nice and easily for you, and we're going to look at the new shock absorber I got, or the new strut. So I bought both the new struts for £77 off eBay. It's an old car, I just needed the cheapest, quickest thing that looked semi-reasonable, so I grabbed these. And these are the lemon fodder top mount and the bearing that I got as well. So all in all, parts list about £120. Right, so this is the old strut. That should be returning much quicker, and it shouldn't be that easy to compress. And that's the new one, and I'm sort of putting everything I've got into that, and I can just about compress it, but it's returning at a much better rate. So let's build this new one up, and then we can get it back on the car. So with the new one, I'm just going to use the new nut that comes with this. I'm going to try and avoid using any of the old ones. I'm going to put the spring on, so you may have done this to put lowering springs on or to replace it. But I'm going to reuse the old spring, and at the bottom of the strut there's a point where you mount the spring into. You'll sort of see where it hooks around into. I'm not showing it on camera too much. I'm going to put the top mount or the cover back on, and when we push that down as well, there's some little hooks at the bottom that the damper cover will go onto. I'll focus on that a little bit more, a tiny bit later on, probably in a minute. Right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to get this sort of top cover clipped back onto the springs at the top. So this is why you don't want to overly compress the springs. So you just want to push it round on all of the sides and click it back into place. And we're going to put the bearing on in a second as well. Now I've not quite got it fully into place. I do need to put a bit of pressure on there. The bearing wasn't sitting flush enough. So once you push it down, you are then good to rebuild it. And I think if you didn't do too great a job as you start putting it all back together, it'll pull into place anyway. Right, so we're going to put the 17mm on, and if you're sharp enough, you notice I'm using a different one. I lied about reusing the same one. I'm actually saving that for the top because we hacked the old ones up and didn't trust them to use them again. So we're using a breaker bar, and I'm using sort of my 6mm hex bits. I'm using a slightly beefier set just to hold everything in place, and I'm going to do up this nut. So this one is actually 19mm. And once we've done that, I'm just going to tighten the last bit up by hand. Now there probably is an appropriate torque spec to use here, however I just went for as reasonably tight as possible. So now we've got the new bearing on, we've got the new nut on, new strut. We're going to put the new top mount on here. I don't know how tight I expect this to go on or not, it's actually fairly loose. But now that's done, we can take the springs off, we can go and reinstall the strut on the car. So I'm going to undo these the same way we put them off, and do a little bit each side just to slacken them off, and I've already pre-slackened them off actually before filming this bit. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this cover over the strut. So there's about 4 of these tabs as you go around, and you're just going to pull it over, and it just keeps that dust cover over the strut, keeps rubbish out of there, and it keeps it nice and clean. So we're now in a position to put the strut back onto the car, which is the reverse of how we took it off, but with any of the complications removed. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the top cover on, there's a little washer, and then we're going to use that new 19mm that I've put to one side. We're going to put the hub back into the strut, so you need to line that up. I'm going to pop that in, and then we're going to do up these 17mm. Right, notice the drive shaft. I had an issue where the tripod joint had popped out. I had a lot of drive shaft fun on this Honda Jazz. It's just something to sort of pay attention to, because you might find out as soon as you try and do everything else back up that it's not quite where you expected it to be. They should plunge in and out on the plunge joint. I had a lot of fun. So 17mm are done up. We're going to redo up that 12mm bracket, and I've transferred that bracket across from the old strut. It might just need popping off with a screwdriver or a pry bar quickly. So once we've done the two 17mm up, we've done that 12mm up. Next we're going to get the anti-roll bar back in after we've put that piece of wiring back into place. So it's got a little pop joint where it goes into. I'll be honest, it's not completely tight, could use with a cable tie, but it is back in. So we're going to put the anti-roll bar link back through there, and you might need to jack these struts. You might need to jack underneath the hub with a block of wood, not to damage anything, just to get it into the right place. And we're going to get this tightened up again. So again, I think that was 15 or 16mm, but they do vary in design slightly, so just use whatever on your toolkit works. So just the last thing here, I'm just going to jack up the strut before I tighten it from on top. So that's just to make sure that it's fully through its hole there, so that when I tighten the nut from on top, it can go all the way down. So the same as taking it off, we're going to put the 6mm in. I'm going to use a 19mm because I've got 19mm nuts on here. and I'm going to tighten it all the way down. So I'm just speeding this up, and I'm going to jump across in a second. I'm going to do the final tighten, and that is it. That's actually us done. Now it's probably worth saying, once you've got the wheels back on and it's back on the ground, it's probably worth just giving that a last quick double check, but that's it, you're done with the job. So we've gone through on this: how to remove the strut from the car, how to compress the springs, how to remove the top mount, how to replace the bearing, and how to put it all back together again should you have any of these issues. I hope this video has been useful for you. If you've had nightmare issues, please check out the video I'll be putting up in a few days' time. If you've got any comments or feedback, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. But more than anything, thank you for watching.